GSP, obviously, he's in a contract dispute. Ultimately, we know the UFC would love to get him back and get him to fight if they can make it happen. How important do you think this is to the UFC right now? How important is GSP's return? Do you see it as a really high priority, or do you think that they are okay with Ronda and Conor basically driving the show here?
You know, there are a lot of layers to this GSP story, and one thought that keeps coming up is, you know, Dana White has said in multiple interviews, and I know part of that is just, you know, promoter talk and whatnot, but he has said that he doesn't believe that GSP wants to fight. I think GSP has laid it out pretty clearly that he wants to fight. And they're claiming he has a contract. He's claiming that they're in breach, and the contract has, you know, pretty much been null and void. So if they think he doesn't want to fight and there's no use for him, why don't you just let him go? Why don't you just let him go test the market, get a deal, and fight? Now, of course, we all know that they don't want him to go sign with Bellator or anyone else because he is a hot commodity. I think if, let's say, a Bellator signed GSP, I think he can go to the Bell Center in Montreal, the Air Canada Center in Toronto, and fill up that place, sell it out in minutes. He's that big of a star, and I think people, you know, based on how they're reacting to this story, still very much care about him. He said something interesting, that the new owners told him that they'd have to spend a lot of money reintroducing him to the public upon his return, and I think that's crazy. I mean, he last fought 3 years ago. It wasn't that long ago. People still remember who arguably the greatest of all time is. Another interesting element to all this is, you know, GSP is represented by CAA. And now we know that the new owners of the UFC is WME IMG, and if you know the history of, you know, these agencies, they've had a rocky past for many years, and I wonder if that has anything to do with it. So, like I said, there are many layers. I think it would be pretty much an unprecedented stretch for the UFC if they could do 205 with the card that they have, 206 with GSP plus the DC title fight, and then 207 with the return of Ronda. I mean, I can't think of a better stretch than that, and I truly feel for the Canadian fans because right now I think that 206 card is a little thin. I also feel for DC, who gets pay-per-view points and would definitely, you know, stand to gain a lot from GSP being on the card. So, I hope it gets, you know, solved one way or another, and I think GSP did a good job of not slamming that door, burning any bridges. So we'll see. But yeah, I think that the UFC could use a GSP.
I'll tell you, GSP always handles these situations right. I used the word in the previous segment, class. I mean, he really, in my opinion, he did it the best with class the entire time. And you kind of hinted towards my next question is, do you think the timing, you know, had GSP really been this serious about returning before the sale, 3 months before the sale, where there was more money to be spent, but now where they're really looking to cut cost, obviously, because they've paid such a hefty price to get this company, do you think his price tag is maybe what's causing them to delay this?
You know, it is possible. I mean, clearly they're at odds over the price tag. And by the way, great point on the class aspect of GSP. I mean, if you recall, back in the day, showing up to press conferences wearing a suit was an anomaly, and he was one of the first to do that. You know, he would show up to these pre-fight press conferences wearing a suit while everyone else was wearing, you know, flip-flops and Affliction T-shirts. So he was really a pioneer in that.
He got made fun of for doing that. Yeah, Yep. Made fun of for doing that. I remember back then. I remember Brandon Vera saying, "What are we dressing up for these for all of a sudden when I wore a suit?"
Yeah, it's great. And now look at everyone wearing these nice suits, which I think is great for the sport, by the way. You know, so yes, to answer your question, I mean, I think the UFC pulled out all the stops for UFC 200. I don't know in this day and age if the new owners, after paying $4 billion, are breaking the bank to get a Brock Lesnar for essentially one night only. A lot changed after that, and GSP said in that interview with me yesterday on the MMA Hour that, you know, with Lorenzo, he was at the goal line, and they had a deal, and then the new owners come in, and they say that deal is no longer in play, and we're going to talk about a new deal. What's interesting to me is Chris Weidman told me last week that in order to get his deal done for 205 and beyond, his new contract, he had to go to Las Vegas and meet with Lorenzo Fertitta. Fertitta kind of served as this mediator, which is kind of mind-blowing in the sense that he just sold the company. Why is he still involved in deals? But if that happened, and we know he still has a very good relationship with Dana White, why couldn't the same be done with GSP? That's another weird aspect to all of this. And like I said, I mean, the UFC, from what I'm told, laying off around 60 to 80 employees today. There's a reason for that. You talk about cost-cutting and, you know, duplicate jobs and things like that. So, yeah, anyone who thought that WME IMG was going to pay $4 billion, keep it all the same, and, just kind of go on their merry way, you're fooling yourself. So, A, they want to try to bring, more revenue in. They're going to try to do things strategically to start getting in the black. And B, they have a lot of their own people that they want to put in. And unfortunately, that's just the nature of business acquisitions, as you know.
I can't agree more. I've said it so many times on this show that, no matter who owns the UFC, who runs the UFC, it's going to be successful because the athletes, the stories, the type of people that compete in this sport and how they get there is so unique, so original. I appreciate very much you saying that.